warm welcome from my side as well. So first of all, the usual legal disclaimer at the beginning, so that everything is proprietary to SAP and everything is as well subject to change, so that you are knowledgeable of this one as well. And we have as well this hashtag for ALM Summit to put your social media posts there. And then coming to the agenda for today. So in this session, we will first give you an introduction of the objectives of change and deployment management in general. Then we'll talk a little bit about the Cloud ALM deployment integration that we have so far and what is planned. Then we'll go and dig a bit deeper into the Cloud Transport Management service itself, before we then show as well the CI/CD and the deployment management, how this works together. This will first be shown on the slides how it should be done, and at the end we will show then as well in the demo how it is then actually done at the moment with SAP Cloud ALM in conjunction with Cloud Transport Management Service. Then we have a bit of information around the complex landscapes and multi-deploy to production, before we will then close with the outlook and some further information. All right, coming to the introduction. So what are the objectives of deployment management, mainly in SAP Cloud ALM, but in general, it is the objective or are the objectives of deployment management. First of all, we would like to speed up the delivery process. So that should be done by orchestrating heterogeneous transport mechanisms. So at the end, different SAP solutions do have different deployment mechanisms, transport mechanisms, and that's what we would like to orchestrate then as well with SAP Cloud ALM. And by that, we would like to facilitate and accelerate the delivery process. Secondly, it's definitely about ensuring the reliability by making upgrades and changes a non-event. And that's handled via these orchestrated go-lives based on releases. So we can see here as well that we see the different timelines that could be as well created and used and utilized in SAP Cloud ALM here on this screenshot. And via these orchestrated go-lives, we try to ensure then in the end that you don't have any disruption to your production or to your productive business. And last but not least, this goes hand in hand then as well with the increase of transparency via built-in traceability that we have in SAP Cloud ALM, so that you can always stay on top of your deployment throughout your change landscape that you have in place. So we can see here as well some further information on where the transports are at the moment, so that you get there, always up-to-date information about the different features that are driven through your landscape. Where are they? Maybe if there are some transport containers still missing, so that you always stay on top and keep track of your deployment activities. Coming to the deployment integration overall. So Cloud ALM should be the change management and deployment orchestration tool that is in the end overarching everything. And we have at the moment a deployment integration into the change and transport system. So that means we can orchestrate their transports for SAP S/4HANA on-premise as well as for SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition. But at the end, it's for each and every SAP ABAP NetWeaver stack that has a certain sub-basis and SDPI level. So at the end, we can as well support their ECC stacks, for example, that could be used still in these hybrid landscapes. The second pillar that we have there now is the Cloud Transport Management service integration that is available. That is mainly at the moment focusing on SAP Business Technology Platform, where we can cover, for example, in the integration suite, cloud integration or API management, but as well BTP applications that could be created. And that's what we will focus on today as well in our demo. But the idea and the goal is as well that Cloud TMS could be kind of the deployment tool for all the different SAP Cloud solutions, like, for example, SAP Fieldglass, SAP Ariba, SAP SuccessFactors. So that's still on discussion, and that's still on the roadmap there to be integrated with the Cloud Transport Management Service. And last but not least, we are working on an integration as well with the adaptation transport organizer from SAP Cloud ALM end. This is planned for Q3 2023, and with that we can as well then support SAP S/4HANA Cloud as well as SAP integrated business planning. So at the end, that would be then more or less the last step for the time being, so that we get the deployment integrations into the different SAP solutions at hand, so that we can really serve the intelligent enterprise. With that, I would hand over to Harald to talk a little bit about the Cloud Transport Management Service.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Moritz. Yeah, as Moritz already said, Cloud Transport Management Service is, say, the counterpart to the change transport system on the ABAP stack. So if we talk about transporting content in the SAP BTP environment, then Cloud Transport Management would be the tool of choice. And basically, the idea is comparable to what you might know from the on-premise world in the change transport system or in the enhanced transport system, so that you model your transport landscapes by setting up so-called transport nodes, which represent your sub-accounts inside your BTP landscape. Then you connect these transport nodes by transport routes. These routes show the direction in which the transport requests are flowing. And if you have transport nodes which are used for deploying content, then you need a destination, which then points to the specific sub-account to which the content should be pushed to. And so this is more or less the basic idea of setting up your landscape, and you can set up more than one landscape, of course, with inside Cloud Transport Management, depending on your different use cases. As Moritz already pointed out, for example, you have application development. This would be one kind of landscape. Then you would have potentially cloud integration, API management, launchpad content, and so on. And there you could have several landscapes within one instance of Cloud Transport Management. So why did we do that? As said, we would like to have a cloud-centric transport tool, so where you don't need an ABAP backend for performing the cloud transports. However, of course, the, let's say, higher level change management tool is Cloud ALM or a solution manager, so that, as I said, the Cloud TMS is the transport tool below this higher level change management level. Cloud TMS has some lower level auditing possibilities, but again, we are seeing the Cloud ALM as the level on which you have the overall picture of your transport landscape. We have the role concept, and so that we can have a separation of concerns, not so relevant in our example here. And that's, I think, quite important. We have the option to synchronize transports between on-premise and cloud via the integration with Cloud ALM. And that's exactly the point we are focusing on today. As said, the content types are mainly development artifacts, and on the other side, application content artifacts. The plan is, as Moritz said, to integrate more and more BTP services and cloud solutions in the public cloud area. One more click, yeah. We have the integration of CTMS with CI/CD. We will look into that in a second. And we have the integration with Cloud ALM and Solution Manager Charm. And we also offer open APIs if other integrations are needed. Yeah, and last not least, maybe one more click. Good thing is that when you are using your Cloud ALM entitlement, you get the usage rights for Cloud Transport Management with it. Yeah, and if you get a new account now, the Cloud Transport Management is even already set up as a subscription in the same sub-account. So that's very, very easy to start with. You can also use Cloud Transport Management as a standalone subscription. Then it would be a payable service, quite cheap, but not free as it is with Cloud ALM. All right, let's go to the next slide. As said, Cloud ALM has the Cloud TMS subscription integrated. So maybe one more click, then we can see it. So when you subscribe to, or when you activate your Cloud ALM subscription, then we are creating a sub-account in which the Cloud ALM subscription is running. And in the same sub-account, you will then also find the Cloud Transport Management service with the option here to set up your transport landscape within this instance. The needed roles are also provided during the installation of the sub-account, so that you can then assign your landscape management team to set up your landscape. Yeah, so this is available since May 2022, and we have already quite a few customers using it. And the integration is also on the level that inside your Cloud ALM launchpad, you will find a tile for accessing Cloud Transport Management as well. Right. Yeah, now let's go into the CI/CD integration part. So what does it mean? Maybe one more click, please. Okay, so basically what we have is we are looking now at the application development use case. So we have a development team or developers working with an IDE, for example, the Business Application Studio. And then, yeah, let me click one more time. They are working against a central source code repository, Git-based, so GitHub, Bitbucket, Azure repositories, whatever. And there you are storing centrally the source code of your development. The developers are fetching this source code for their current task, working on it, changing it, adding new artifacts, and then they are pushing these changes to the central source code repository, to the Git post, and then this triggers a pipeline in the continuous integration delivery service, in this case, or server, depending on what kind of setup you're choosing. In our use case here now, we're using the continuous integration and delivery service, which is a pipeline as a service running in BTP as well. And this then starts building the artifacts from the source code, which is stored inside the repository. So we have a building, and this pipeline can also include automated tests, which are then performed on the newly built artifacts. It can be static source code checks, it can be unit tests, whatever. And then, depending on the outcome of these tests, the user gets a notification of the failure or success of the pipeline run. And so then he can, depending on what is the outcome, he can then do some corrections or start with the next step of his development. Yeah. So as said here, CI/CD, Continuous Integration Delivery Service, is a pipeline as a service. It has predefined pipelines for typical SAP use cases, so that you can really setting up, just switching on and off the stages inside the pipeline you need for your use case. And then you have your running pipeline virtually in minutes. Okay, and then one step inside this pipeline you can choose to use is the release step. And this release step is optional and contains a handover of your build artifacts to Cloud Transport Management. And that's what we will use now in our demo later on, that then after the pipeline has run and your tests have run, you then hand over the content to Transport Management, where they can be then further deployed to further sub-accounts downstream. And this can also include, if we want to, integration into operation of your application or of your deployment process with the so-called alert notification service and automation pilot. These are further services inside BTP, which are, for example, are triggered when a transport request has been delivered to some sub-account. Then automatically we can trigger notification of responsible people, and we can also do some automatic activities like whatever, increasing the resources of the sub account or something which is needed for running the deployed application. And last not least, and again, another main focus of our today's session is the integration of this overall process with our application lifecycle management platforms, mainly Cloud ALM today. And so we have this integration of Cloud Task Management and the notification service into these ALM platforms so that from this central place, you can then manage your complete deployment process. All right. So I think, yeah, that gives you another view to that picture. So again, on the left side, we see the continuous integration delivery service as the source of our transport requests. They are then handed over to Cloud Transport Management so that they can from there be deployed to our other sub-accounts further downstream, like pre-production and production. And on the other side, we have the on-premise side of the house. So with the classical ABAP change and transport system, CTS. And both are then managed from one central place in the Cloud ALM deployment management. And so that you have one feature which contains a cloud part or several cloud parts and several other parts, and they together form then your overall feature. And these transports are managed centrally from one place in the Cloud ALM. So that's the basic idea of this hybrid deployment management. All right.
All right, and then I will take over again. Thank you, Harald. So how does that look like in SAP Cloud ALM? So we have the feature in Cloud ALM. That's kind of our change document, I would say, where we then store at the end all the different transport requests, and that could serve then hybrid use cases. So means we can have transports of Cloud Transport Management service as well as the ones from the change and transport system assigned to one feature. And that's how we can then in the end synchronize the deployment to production for those different SAP solutions, like we can see here below, where we have then here one transport for OData APIs, for example, and another one that is classical CTS, that's an S/4HANA on-prem transport, and they can be deployed then via one feature to the production stages together to synchronize then the deployment to production. And that's what we would like to show now as well in the demo. So that's where I will then jump to our Cloud ALM system. Entering the full screen. All right. So when we jump to the features application there from the Launchpad, we can see that we have always the project and the scope context in that sense. So we have it now for our implementation project. For the finance scope, we have several features already created. And we have one particular feature that we will use today for our hybrid change that's still in specification. So that would mean anyone in your project team, so most likely a change manager maybe could be the one, but it could be as well somebody maybe from the project team itself who is then responsible for it, to create those features in a sense and to as well put additional attributes and properties there. And when we jump now into this feature, we can see, okay, it should be properly specified at the moment because it's a specification. It has the priority medium. We can see here the release as well and the description. And when we now go to the additional information, so maybe that's important and interesting as well, we have in addition as well kind of a work stream where we say that's an integration use case here because it's our hybrid demo change that we have there. But maybe important as well, it could be as well coupled to a requirement. So means if you're starting with your requirements, then breaking it down then into several features for deployment later on, that's possible. And you always have then the relation to your particular requirement. And together with the release, where you can then plan at the end which bundles of features per release should go to production, it's possible then, as mentioned, to bundle those deployments to production. And I will show that later as well in one of the last steps of our demo. But what I would do now is I will just go up again to the description and I will start the implementation of the feature because I say, okay, now we can really go ahead with our hybrid change. And that's where I would then hand over to Harald, to our developer, who can then take over showing us what's happening in the background.
All right, thanks, Moritz. So I will now take over the sharing. Okay. All right. Okay. So what I did is I used, as shown in this overall picture, you see the Business Application Studio to create some UI5 application. So, for example, imagine you have a BTP front end to a back end application running in your on-premise world. And so here, this could be part of your UI5 or Fiori front end running in BTP. And this is so connected to a repository inside GitHub. And when I committed the last change to my front end, I triggered a pipeline. So this is now the view into the continuous integration delivery service. And you see here, I have a pipeline run. I started that just prior to the starting of this workshop today on 2:30. And you see here, there's a commit ID associated with it. So the commit ID 8DF6 something. Yeah? And this pipeline run was successful. It took like 6 minutes. And at the end of this pipeline run, we were starting the release stage. And this release stage then handed over the transport request to Cloud Transport Management. And if I now look into my Cloud Transport Management environment, running inside the same sub-account as the corresponding Cloud ALM subscription, I see here my transport landscape we are using for this demo. It consists of a development node, a QA node, and 2 productive nodes. The pipeline is configured in a way that it hands over the transport request to the development node, where I then currently have to trigger the first import manually, because we have here still some kind of inconsistency between the thinking of the CI&D service and the Cloud ALM handling. But anyway, now in the Q&A node, the transport request I was talking about is available. I can now look into the queue of this node here, and I find now a transport request. 2553 is the transport number, and it refers to the commit ID 8DF6, what I have just seen inside my CI&D service. And I can also have a look into what's inside there. And we see here we have some UI5 application, which is then making up this transport request. Yeah. So just to show you how I came to this transport request. But as Moritz said, the main idea is that we are handling everything from within the feature. And if I now go to the feature, let me just refresh the view here. If I go now to the feature, which has now been set to from in specification to which is now in the status of being in implementation, which means currently the development is running. I'm now in the position to assign transport requests to this feature. And I will start doing that. I'm now switching to the edit mode so that I can assign new transport requests. I go down to the transport requests, and you have now here the assign button. And this now gives you a list of available transport requests, which can be assigned to this feature. And we have on the one side the ABAP-based transport requests, which will be handled by Moritz in a second. And I will now pick my cloud transport, the 2553, as mentioned, with the reference to this commit ID, and add it to or assign it to this feature. And so now this is part of the feature. And when I now would start deploying, this would be the thing to be deployed, or the import of the transport request would be triggered. But as said, we would like to have a hybrid situation here. And so now let's hand back to Moritz after I have saved, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. Save and close.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Harald. So then I will take over the sharing again. And that's really pretty impressive what's possible there already with the CI&D service. And what we can see now, so I need to refresh then as well my feature on my end. And with some magic, we see, okay, the transport was assigned. Yeah, so we can as well check in the history. So there we should then as well see that Harald was the one who assigned then the transport request. So everything is documented properly here as well. So we know that the transport 2553 was assigned by Harald to this feature. And I have already prepared one on-premise transport as well. So an S/4HANA on-premise transport. And when we jump over here once again in the edit mode to assign a transport, we can just take our transport for hybrid change demo transport that is exported from O11 client 200. And we can see both are there. Yeah. So we see as well what's the target tenant. So we could see in Harald's demo already on the CTMS end. We have the target node is the open SAP QA. So that's the quality stage. And for our on-premise scenario, we have a 3-tier landscape coming from O11 to O12 to O13. And when I save now, we see at the end, okay, what changed? We see that we now have an enabled deploy button. So within the feature, we could trigger then the deployment to the next stage. And the idea is really that we say, okay, you are driving your feature. So means you're driving your feature through QA stage so that you can then as well hand it over to a test so that somebody could test. And at the end, if several features, if we remember what we had at the beginning, would serve one requirement, it's at the end depending on what is the status of all the features assigned to a requirement if you would like to do some testing on requirement level, like a functional integration test on requirement level, or you have the user acceptance test because that's what business needs then, for example. So that's the idea behind it. And when we trigger now the deployment from here, we get then, once again, confirmation question. Do you want to deploy all transports? And it's always taken care all the transports assigned to one feature are taken. So that's why we asked if you would like to deploy to O12-200 as well as to the open SAP QA. And I would say yes now. And the idea behind and the logic behind is then really that we synchronize the deployment to production. So that would mean if there is still one transport that is kind of lagging behind for some reasons, we would always first deploy then the transports as well to the test stage so that we can then at the end really synchronize the deployment of all transports assigned to a feature to production. So that's the idea behind it.
And to some extent, maybe to say, we can also to some extent handle uneven landscapes. So for example, if you should have, say, a 4-system landscape on the on-premise side and a 3 sub-account landscape in your cloud, that could also be covered. And as Moritz said, the synchronization point would be a synchronized deployment to production at the end.
All right. Thanks a lot, Harald. So that's right. And what I will do now, I will just accelerate a little bit the import process to O12 because there is a job running in the background on the managed system. So let's see. And then we can as well, after some time, then check if the deployment happened properly. So just a second, let's see what's maybe one of the transports. It's already happened. Perfect. And now we can see that both of the transports are deployed to the next stage. That means O13 is now the target tenant, so the target client in the end, because that's our production stage for the on-premise part. And as Harald showed as well, the transport route. So there we have kind of a multiplexing at the end. So that would mean from one QA system, we would then as well bring the transport into 2 production tenants. And that's something we can as well tackle. So that's why we see here, we have all the target tenants. We get the information that is read on the one hand here from the TMS or from the transport management system. And here we read it then from CTMS at the end, what are the landscapes, and we can cover that. And Now it would be the case that you say, okay, now I would like to hand over this feature to test because I'm sure, okay, we have deployed to test. So that's when testing is ready. That would be at the moment still possible to do it on the requirement level at the moment mainly. So future we will then as well have an integration into the test management with the feature itself. But for the time being, testing would be on requirement level. And when you have done the testing, you can then later on approve then the deployment to production for the feature. And that's very important because if you would go ahead and would say, okay, deploy button is already active, I would like to deploy now, you would get the information that you would like to deploy into production tenants and that the status needs to be ready for production of the feature. So it means that's our safety net so that you cannot deploy at the moment features to production that are not yet ready and that are not yet marked to be deployed to production. So what we need to do here is we need to approve the feature first for the production import, and then we can as well trigger from here the deployment to production. And the other option would be as well, and that's what I wanted to show now, when we close this feature once again, and we go back to the list, it is as well an option to say, I would like to see all my features that are in status ready for production and that are for my release 2302. And then you see that you have 2 of the features available. And you can select all of them, could be more as well. And then you see that you get here as well a deploy to production button. So that means you can as well synchronize the deployment for several features to production. That's important. If you do a project import or something like that, you have a lot of features that are serving then the purpose of different requirements. Makes a lot of sense that you can as well hit then the deploy to production button from here. Then you get this and you can confirm it from here. So that's possible. I will not do it now, but you could trigger the deployment from here as well. That's one option. So if you do kind of a mass deploy, and the other option that I wanted to share now is when you are directly here within the feature, then you get here as well the deploy option. And now you get as well the information. Okay, would you like to deploy all the transports to the deployment targets? All of them listed once again. And then you can trigger the deployment and we can see deployment to all the different stages triggered together. And that's our synchronized import to production now. And that's the idea behind. And we've seen already to QA, everything worked fine. It could take a little bit longer now. So that's why we will spare you the details, but deployment was scheduled as beforehand as well. And the deployment to the production stages will be done now. All right. Having said that, we are at the end of the demo. I will switch back now to our slide deck once again. And the last point here, more or less, before we go to the outlook and some further information, it's about these complex landscapes and multi-deploy to production. So we've seen that already. We are supporting complex landscapes, and we have shared that here mainly for the Cloud Transport Management service. So the landscapes that you have modeled there, that it's working there. If you have a multiplexing, for example, at the end, that you have several production systems, but could be as well that you have several QA systems or something like that. That means multiple deployment targets per transport. There we will always supply then a single deploy action within a feature, per stage that is there or per node that is integrated in the transport landscape. But it's not only for cloud transport management, so it's the same for the CTS part. So that would mean if you are working with transport target groups, it's the same. So we can as well classical TMS transport target groups. We can as well cover those and support those. And there it would be the same. You would see in the end when you release a transport request that you have several target clients that need to be delivered with the changes. And then you can trigger the deployment and all the different clients will be deployed with the changes. And the deploy of several features to production, we have seen at the end as well what's possible there. So here it is really the idea that we are using the releases that we can see here and the ready for production status so that you can do kind of a release deployment to production. At the moment, only possible really for the deployment to production, but we will then in future as well evolve into the direction that you could as well trigger mass deployment in a sense to the test stage, so to the quality assurance stages if you want to. And that's what we've seen so far, and that's what is working there as well and what needs to be highlighted here, because that's really one factor as well to keep your production stable and to orchestrate everything. And maybe one thing, because that's asked a lot as well for the on-premise part, we are doing an import subset at the end. So if there are several features, and within these features you have a lot of transport requests, we are taking the whole list of transport requests that we have there, and we are doing an import subset. So means in the end the sequencing is taken care of as well during the import, because that's as well very important, so that nothing could break in the production system. All right, with that, we are already at the Outlook and some further information point. And there I would hand back to Harald first.
All right, yeah. What are we planning in the near future for Cloud Task Management? So I think the major news we can share here is that in the Q1 of 2023, we are planning to release the support for the ABAP SAP BTP environment, as an ABAP environment on the cloud, or it's known as Steampunk. There we will have an integration with Cloud Transport Management, and that in turn means that then we can also handle these kind of transport requests via Cloud ALM, which I think will be a major step forward. What we also have is the transport request centric view. This is already available. That has been just recently released, which allows you to have a view on a not only on one transport queue, but also on the history of one transport request across all queues inside your landscape. So that can be helpful as well. And last not least, we have the option of landscape migration, which is quite important for customers who already used Cloud Transport Management in the past and now would like to use the instance of Cloud Transport Management connected to Cloud ALM. There we will have the option to migrate the landscape from your existing one to another instance, so that you don't have to set up your transport landscapes anew. All right, Moritz, your turn.
Yeah. So, and what will be the new stuff in the Cloud ALM area? So what we are at the moment on our way to finish as well, that we have a tag management integration in SAP Cloud ALM. So we have for different other applications in Cloud ALM already the tag management integration available. And it makes a lot of sense, because you could easily as well use the tags then to bundle at the end different features together if you want to. And it's in the end one additional option then to do some reporting, some filtering easily on the different features there. In addition, one of the next steps, and we've seen that already in the flow when I handed over to Harald, right? So the assignee is still missing on the feature end. So if you would have there an assignee, then I could easily as well add the developer to it. So to say that she or he knows, okay, that's my feature where I need to add something, and we will then as well implement the notifications on top of it, so that we first have these in-app notifications that we have for some areas already in SAP Cloud ALM, so that you get the information on this bell icon on top, that there are notifications for you, that maybe you were added as an assignee to a feature or something like that, that you get this information easily. And yeah, we are looking as well into email notifications, so that via email you could be informed as well about changes to features that are important to you. And last but not least, but as well one important point, we want to add references to our features in SAP Cloud ALM. Maybe that doesn't sound that important for the time being, but the interesting part is, on the one hand, we can add references for documentation, so that you have maybe some SharePoint or a documentation storage service where you would like to link then the documentation to SAP Cloud ALM and to your features then. But the other thing that's as well maybe interesting is that we are as well adding kind of a transport reference. So that's in the end an ID that you could add, maybe as well with a short text and an URL, so that you have then as well in the transport section of your feature as well the option to, for example, reference SuccessFactors transports or Ariba transports, where you have an ID or something like that, so that you can easily keep track of it. And you will have then as well the information somewhere in the traceability, so that you can later on easily figure out what's there and what is really related to the feature itself. All right, having said that, we have a bit of further information as well added here to the slide deck. So first of all, some information about the Cloud ALM roadmap, and then of course of the Cloud Transport Management roadmap there. And we have a few blog posts available around those different topics. First of all, blog post on the interplay of SAP Cloud ALM and Cloud Transport Management Service. So that's one that I have created where you are mainly looking into the area of the CPI part, so the cloud integration part. And the second blog post, Harald, is from your end. Maybe you would like to say a few words about that one?
Yeah, exactly. And this here shows then how the integration happens when we have a development use case on Neo, where you create a Neo application and then very basically use the so-called export wizard to create a transport request, and how this then ends up in a feature in Cloud ALM. So this is another use case for the development part if you are, for example, developing on Neo.
Yeah, and the last links that we have there are mainly about the help portal, where we get some further documentation around the different topics if you're interested to learn more about Cloud ALM or Cloud Transport Management Service. And we have then as well, on the one hand, the expert portal for SAP Cloud ALM, where we're constantly adding new information and updates about what's happening in our area. And Harald, Cloud Transport Management FAQ.
And this is in the SAP community portal. So there we have a specific Cloud TMS FAQ page where you can look up the most common questions, like, for example, can transport management transport across global accounts? Yes, it can. Okay.
Perfect. Right. And then having said that, we are at the end of our session, and we would like to thank you